right.
Welcome, everyone. This is Trey. It's the 17th day of July 2018, and I'm here with a new friend named Adam Bogosian. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yeah, spot on. I mean,
Okay.
over the years, telemarketers, friends, even family members are getting confused. That the name doesn't.
Well, good. Well, I had was chit-chatting around on I think it's Defending Presuppositionalism on Facebook, and there was a guy named Max, who this is named after. I'll change the title later, who was uh, a Buddhist or something, questioning Christian morality, and he had technical difficulties, wasn't able to engage. But Adam here had chimed in, and I asked him if he would be willing to step in for a Max, and he said yes. So here we are. So thank you. It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet
Adam.
you.
Okay. Would you mind? This is very extemporaneous. I don't know. I don't even know what you are. Are you a skeptic, a Christian? And
I'm a human being. Okay.
okay,
No, you're right. I mean,
you're not a dog. Yeah, I can get that.
say again.
You're not a dog. Yeah, you're a human being. I
All
got that
right,
much.
cool. Yeah, I'm glad you at least were able to make out that much so far. To be clear, if it wasn't at least for you already, and for anyone else who cares, I don't obviously agree with. I believe he was a not a Christian presuppositionalist, but a presuppositionalist nonetheless. For a different deity. So I was mostly just trying to point out where I find that his presuppositionalism falls down, and where his more than anything more would be where his critique of Christian presuppositionalism is. I mean, the way what I tried to communicate, if nothing else, was just that he's likely going to fall down or run into some serious problems when just trying to communicate the thing he's trying to say. Because, well, to surmise, you have two very different, I think even like a Christian presuppositionalist might say, two different starting points. And they're different epistemological um, starting points, I guess you might say. Starting points may not be the best way to characterize it, but they are two different frameworks for understanding truth. So concepts specifically like hell and what punishment or harm might mean contextually for the Christian presuppositionalist, and even just the Christian in general, it's going to be different. How they conclude when something is harmful um, or justified, uh, it's going to map to other and draw upon other specifically Christian theological concepts, or Jewish theological concepts that relate to essentially that religion. And there's not going to be a sort of one-to-one mapping in the secular world or like in the world of other um, religions. And I apologize. I realized I just locked my cat out. So hold on one second. He's like begging to get in. Right. So I guess you were actually asking like what I affirm, like what position I affirm, like if I'm a Christian or not, I assume. Was that your question?
Or yeah, a presuppositionalist. What's your world in which you filter this existence in which we live?
Right. And I apologize because I think that was your question and I'm just like rambling on. So I'm not a presuppositionalist. I would not call myself a Christian presuppositionalist. I actually find Christian presuppositionalism to be um, I have a lot of issues with it. I think it represents a lazy approach to apologetics. And I don't, believe it or not, I don't mean that purely to insult, but because it seems to be, among other things, riddled with, for example, you find often the case, there's a lot of those who subscribe to it and try to use that as their apologetic method. Uh, there's a lot of buzzwords, there's a lot of attention um, given toward like buzzwords and just other kind of superficial indicators of truth and of what's being spoken about. It's why you have there's this word game shell game tactic. Excuse me, it's a shell game tactic where you have wordplay, where you have this word, this term introduced, like knowledge, for example. And actually, knowledge is a good example because this is like a term that gets abused a lot in this way. And you'll introduce this term and you'll define what you mean when you say knowledge, but then in a separate later instance, use it in a completely different way. Is that your dog?
No.
Oh, okay. That's, oh, well, yikes.
I don't think it is. I have a dog, but she's not barking.
Oh, neighbor's dogs. Yeah, that's always fun.
Probably.
Dog that you didn't ask for.
Well, let me interrupt you here, Adam.
Sure.
I'm not a presuppositionalist either. That's not really my question. I want to know your worldview. What kind of worldview? Are you a skeptic? Are you a humanist? Are you a
Right. Okay.
Christian?
Sorry about that. Yeah. So, I mean, yes, I am a skeptic. I advocate for skepticism. Excuse me. Skepticism. I guess you'd call it positive skepticism, uh, positive humanism, secular humanism. It's funny because, and I don't mean to just be overly pedantic, though I do have that tendency, but it's a nuanced discussion any way you look at it. I could shorthand it and bottom line it for you and say, no, I'm not a Christian, even though I was raised to be one. Um, but in many ways, I still kind of feel like I almost am. And, never mind what a Christian might do with that and say about that. I feel that way because in a sense, I'm doing much of what I was doing as I sort of transitioned out of the more dogmatic, um, traditionalist, kind of more, I guess you would say, mainstream kind of Christian. And plenty of Christians, mind you, Christians who even believe they are mainstream will still have their certain beliefs, like within their denomination. There's so many denominations. Um, and that's important to note because it's like whether we want it to be or not, it's a nuanced and not so clear conversation. Um, but yeah, I definitely am a skeptic and a humanist. Um,
Okay,
but
so you were raised though in a Christian environment, and you have
right,
apostatized,
I missed that last part.
and you apostatized. You fell away.
I did. I did. In fact, and this is the point I was going to get to. I'll just throw it out there. I am to this day arguably doing much of what I did back when I was trying to live out my obligation of First Peter 3:15, to give an account, to always be prepared to give an account for essentially what you believe and why. Um, and that required me engaging atheists quite often, though not exclusively, and doing the amount of study and research on my own, um, to be able to back up the things I said, to be some kind of knowledgeable. And over time, that gave way to realizing that if I'm to be intellectually honest, if I'm to be honest myself, I can't keep putting forth a belief simply because it's what's been shoved down my throat or because
Sure.
it's common theology. So
Mhm.
that led me to where I am today. Yes, I am a secular humanist, advocate for positive atheism, positive skepticism. Um, I mean, these things don't have to be bad words. And, I think that when people are transitioning out of their religion, and I don't say that to necessarily belittle religion, or to act as though I'm somehow smarter now, because that's not the case. But I think a lot of people on their way out, for lack of a better word, um, entertain some uh, other other philosophies that I think get regarded often as kind of woo. Um, I've done that too, and I stick to it as much as I can. I definitely do see humans as being novel. I wouldn't waste my time, trying to discuss or figure out if how if we are at all as a species better than say another species, because there is that kind of common theme in um, a religion like the big three to kind of view all other species as being not merely separate, but kind of underneath you, in a manner of speaking, that you have dominion over them. I obviously don't agree with that, and I don't think that we're in any way, shape, or form better than other species necessarily. I think we are the stewards of this planet as much as they are. I think that we have a unique awareness that may or may not be shared. Even that is something that may be redefined in the future as we learn more. So,
Okay, so I just want to ask another question. I hope it's okay. But
oh yeah, yeah,
what
absolutely.
kind of Christian denomination were you out of that you came from?
Oh man, so I have a mom who is a born and raised Nazarene, which is fairly high up on the conservative, chain.
Mhm.
Jesus was a Nazarene. Um, so that might tell you something. Actually, it doesn't because you just have to research and figure it out. Anyway, my dad, he I think became a believer sometime during his youth, around the junior high age. Um, so yeah, I was definitely raised in that kind of
so, so,
environment.
so it's a Nazarene denomination.
So I'm sorry. So as far as what I ever became, if I could be said to,
Mhm.
ever accepted a particular one, I think Baptist might be most applicable because we didn't have like one that we decided on for the family, but often we would frequent Baptist churches. Yeah. Apart from that, I
Okay.
think maybe born again would be fitting, but
Okay. All right. Well, it seems to me like maybe that you, yeah, probably a conservative Baptistic type background,
yeah,
but probably
yeah.
not really. Would it be fair to say that your background is not the environment in which you practiced your religion was not terribly theological or intellectually challenging? Would that be a fair thing to say?
I would say at least half of it, if we can speak about it quantitatively. I think that, not to jump the gun or anything, but my dad's a PhD holder. He's a smart guy. He's a really smart guy. Um,
Yeah, but having education academically doesn't
right.
necessarily translate to
Absolutely.
you know
Absolutely. You're right.
personal
Yeah.
understanding.
So as far as, I mean, I'll just try to keep it more specific to your question,
Hmm.
for one. Uh, Again, I think the foundation, like probably with most Christians, was more general, less cerebral, maybe you could say,
Yeah,
or I guess less concerned with theology and apologetics. It was
yeah,
more straightforward, if that makes any
sure.
sense.
Yeah, it does. That's generally the milieu in which we live today for Christianity. It's a
Yeah,
kind of anti philosophy, anti theology. They always say that Christ unites, theology divides. That's the
yeah,
mantra of our day, and I think that we're living in a time of actually a theological dark age
I would agree.
in the
I
current
would say,
world.
yeah, I would say that um, the theology represents how we view religious concepts. And I think generally in a consumer-based society, for example, given though that we're also a superpower, and like here in America, and
Hmm.
it's not exclusive to America, but I think it's just a ripe example of this. It's a very flattened approach to quote unquote spirituality, which I do find useful as a
Sure.
term, unlike other atheists I know. Because there's no atheist dogma, so I'm free to do that, but also because I specifically see spirituality as having a use or having a place, if only in a literary or figurative sense. And I appreciate that. I value that. I wouldn't want to
Sure.
lose that just because I want to. There's a lot of cyclical, I think, patterns when it comes to a given group of people. They're raised up in a certain understanding of an idea, and then if they realize that idea or group of ideas is wrong, they want to move away from it, and then there's that process of dissociation. And I think
Hmm.
that when it comes to atheists, and often they're just broad strokes called bitter atheists, there's
Hmm.
actually a sort of truth in that, I think, though, but it's misidentified or misplaced. Um, because sure, there are a lot of people who, when they become atheists, when they are honest with themselves and they realize, I don't believe um, and they are an atheist at that point.
Mhm.
Wouldn't we expect them to turn around and have a sort of, bitterness toward that part of their life which they view to be in error, even if there were great times and even if there were valuable things learned along the way? Ultimately, much of it was a lie. And all the while, you have people who you love, likely, who are still in it, and that's
Mhm.
frustrating. And also, you may even feel a little bit duped. Like, how could, because when we're kids, we're impressionable. So in
Mhm.
the same way that somebody might go, wow, I can't believe my uncle, you know, um, you know, God forbid, molested me when I was a child. If there was a person who was frustrated about that,
Mhm.
it's the same kind of idea, I think. So that I think also, unfortunately, contributes to the very flattened, if not altogether, refusal to look at concepts like spirituality and as far as Christians having that same kind of approach, it's a shared kind of cultural milieu, like you were saying.
Mhm.
It's unfortunate because then you get lazy,
Mhm.
intellectually as well as, emotionally, spiritually bankrupt, bereft, um, apologetics.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that, but I think the reason that we're in the situation we're in right now is actually from a lot of the concepts that arose during the Enlightenment. There was my big guy that I like to attack more than anybody is Immanuel Kant, who certainly was not a skeptic. He was a religious man, but he tried to bring a synthesis between rationalism, empiricism, and he ended up basically doubting the reality of inability to know things of metaphysical nature. And so he basically said, you cannot inquire about metaphysics. You can't know yourself, your ultimate essence. You cannot know the of your own being. You also can't know the essence of things, like the essence of tables or whatever you're experiencing. And you can't know the essence of God because you can't experience them with your senses. He called it the noumenal realm. And at that point, most people just basically fell dead at his feet and said, yeah, you're brilliant. That's great. And so what happened in the middle of the 18th century is metaphysics was taken off the table for thinking about things. And so what the Christians said, they said, oh, that's fine. We don't really care about thinking about metaphysics. Just give us our Bibles and we'll entrench in our Bibles and we'll be
Yeah.
happy with that. And that's where you see that degenerated to the fundamentalist movement that we have. And there were some good things about fundamentalism, but oftentimes what they did is, that the fundamentalist movement arose around the turn of the 20th century. And they developed an aversion to change because they said, the old way was best and we need to be faithful to the scriptures. And they really weren't so much interested in inquiry about things, but rather just accepting them. You mentioned that you don't like presuppositionalism. I'm actually in that group because someone added me. I'm an avid opponent to presuppositionalism. I think
Right, which is why I wasn't going in like with guns blazing,
no,
actually.
you didn't seem that
But
way either.
but at the same time, though, yeah, I mean, I'm like you, I'm an advocate against it, or a proponent against it. So that's interesting, though, and I appreciate you sharing, that little history. I tend to not always focus on it as much because I'm less knowledgeable and can't speak as confidently. But actually, it's also because I can see where it isn't always as useful when we're talking about the people who made this or that decision back then.
Mhm.
Correlation is not causation, and that is just one thing to highlight
Mhm.
because that's what we know. Correlation doesn't equal causation. The cause has to be demonstrated, or the explanation for a cause has to be demonstrated to be so by demonstrating its necessity as an explanation and also its sufficiency. Now, that said, it's that much more difficult, if not altogether fruitless and impossible, to know the psychology behind an intention and all of the intentions, which ones contributed to what decision and when, within a person's mind. Um, so I think to the extent that learning about like our history in terms of why someone made this decision and what that affected, to the extent that we can learn about their psychology, it's pretty much anybody's guess. It's like it's like how I often feel this way when Christians will often try to put forth this notion that America was established by Christians, and it was a Christian philosophy that was, the one that basically was one responsible for the moral foundation of this country, as it's often
Right.
put, and in any number of other ways.
Mhm.
And I'm just thinking, well, first of all, not all of the founders were Christian, as you probably know.
No,
And
actually, they weren't Christians, but they came out of the Christian worldview, and
right.
we don't have a Christian nation, but it was our entire every one of the founding fathers uh, believed in the God of the Judeo-Christian tradition, and that's the foundation. Human rights are based upon, in the Declaration of Independence, all men are created equal, endowed by the Creator with unalienable rights. That's why John Locke, who was probably the most personally influenced Thomas Jefferson the most, was very much opposed to atheists, to Roman Catholics, and to Muslims. And he didn't like Roman Catholics and Muslims because they could not work under the rubric of the separation of church and state. And he didn't like atheists because they can have no rational justification for intrinsic rights. In other words, it's got to be irrational. And atheism, I've been I've been doing this for nearly 10 years now, and
No, that's fine. I appreciate, again, coming in hard with historical facts, which I mean I appreciate, because I'm not super knowledgeable, you might say, with respect to history.
Mhm.
Ultimately, though, we're talking about philosophies, quote unquote, worldviews, which I don't believe necessarily ever complete in a person's life. And if so, please tell me when and where. And it certainly wouldn't be at any specific one point for everyone. In other words, at least what I would speculate is that everybody has a developing worldview, and if it ever just like closes such that you can just refer back to it, and it's not a matter of I think people have different methods of discovering truth, of investigating reality, so to speak.
But do you believe that you can know anything? I mean, I'm a little nervous because you keep going off to this edge and saying basically we can't know anything really, almost to a point of skepticism. Certainly, it is difficult to discern people and to understand where they're coming from and to understand a causal relationship rather than a correlative relationship. But it's really important that we not throw out the baby with the bathwater. There is an ability to know things. There is an ability to parse people's worldviews, and there may be a difficulty. Would you agree, though, that it is possible to engage and understand this world and understand each other as we interact in this world?
Sure. I'm a materialist. I'm a materialist, absolutely. But, as often is the case, the distinction between something like methodological naturalism and philosophical naturalism is glossed over. And it would really, if either could be said to be the one that's often, like, for example, when a Christian often says, oh, in a naturalist worldview, you can't account for blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
They're regarding often what would be called philosophical naturalism, wherein you basically have a presupposition against philosophical claims, but material methodologies like just naturalism do not themselves carry with them any presupposition against supernatural claims. It merely says, hey, look, this is the natural world. We have at least this to work with to explore and investigate our world. And sure, yeah, I do believe that there are truths to be discovered, truths in a figurative, metaphorical sense that are less corporeal, but then there also is, of course, this very physical landscape that we can then make very physical determinations. If there's something more, if more is even the appropriate word, something more like a supernatural realm,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not walking into this with the presupposition against those claims, but because I have yet any good reason to believe that those claims are true. In other words, there's no documented cases of supernatural claims. And the time to believe is when there is more to believe, a la, David Hume. So as a good skeptic, I am merely withholding belief. So I would also be, it's fair to say, and I apologize because I was actually thinking deep in thought about some of the things when this started. So hopefully I can just move away from that. One thing I usually mention early on is that I would be what you call like a weak atheist. not to get bogged down with labels, but just, I don't assert to know, nor do I assert the belief, the positive claim that there is no God or no gods exist.
Sure.
I merely withhold belief until such claims have met their burden of proof, which they have yet to do, that I'm aware of. So in terms of truth, so that's more of a philosophical concept, I think, because there are those that would say that no, there's no way for us to discern that which is like ultimately true. Oftentimes, I think presuppositionalists are, a great enough example, if not the best example of this. They'll throw words around like ultimate or even objective when they really mean kind of like absolute. And whether you apply absolute to like morality or if you're saying like objective moral facts or objective truth, I think often they mean like this sort of like ultimate or absolute. Hopefully that made sense. Which has yet to be demonstrated to exist. I mean, there's just certainty. And when they add this sort of extra layer that they'll call like ultimate certainty, it's kind of like they're moving the goalpost. It's kind of like they're at the last minute saying, "Oh no, actually, certainty isn't sufficient," which kind of betrays the term, among other things. Because if you're certain, you're certain. And
well, yeah, but it's not possible to have. Again, I'm not a presuppositionalist, but it's not possible to be a contingent creature or a dependent creature and to have certainty about anything, from my perspective. Now, presuppositionalists will assert that they can have certainty only by presupposing God. I don't believe that. I don't believe it's possible for me to have absolute certainty about anything, because to have absolute certainty, you've got to know everything about everything. You've got to be omniscient, and we're not omniscient.
Sure. And
so that's where we have true justified belief. In other words, we can have a level of certainty, but not absolute certainty about anything.
Well, I would agree, generally speaking, with both the way you've defined it and often how it's defined by presuppositionalists. I don't affirm any kind of absolute certainty. I don't think we can be, quote unquote, absolutely certain about anything. Unfortunately, that's often used by Christians, evangelicals, apologists. At that point, they'll use that to mean, "Oh, so you don't know anything." Whereas in reality, and that's also, of course, draws upon, we need to define our terms. And if we look at knowledge, even just for the sake of a conversation, if we look at knowledge as being something where it's not an all or nothing kind of thing, it's not a black and white, you either you know it or you don't know it at all. And that's, one of their taglines is, you either know it or you don't. Whereas I believe knowledge to be something that, it works on a sort of spectrum wherein you have varying degrees of certainty. And when you say that I know something, it's just like saying, well, I really, 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 really believe it.
Right.
And you can have beliefs that sit atop reason and evidence, and you can have beliefs that don't. So hopefully that kind of fleshed out how I'm looking at those.
Okay. Well, let me move it along here, because I need to
absolutely. I want to break it down. If you had any other specific questions, feel free to just spitfire them at me. I mean,
okay. Well, I want to engage you a little bit. What you're saying that there's no real reason for you to believe in God, and I was just curious if you could give me your justification, both logically. You said you were making the demarcation between philosophical naturalism and material naturalism, and which would correspond to what I'm talking about. How would you give a justification, either logically or ontologically, for your own existence?
How would I give a justification for my existence? Like, how would I demonstrate the proposition?
How'd you get here?
Whether or not I exist?
Yeah, how did you get here?
Well, how I got here, I feel, is it could be a separate question. Maybe you just don't mean it to be that way. I mean,
no, it'll lead to it.
Okay. Well,
I've been doing this a while.
I appreciate the questions, but I don't appreciate having to think about where I came from, which is my parents.
Well, just in a generic sense, okay. And where did your parents come from?
Same thing, only replace them with their parents, and that is the biological means of propagating the species. So,
Okay, now extrapolate that back as far as you can.
uh, I think I just did. I mean, I don't know that I could go much further back than my.
Okay, so all of your ancestors are all contingent in their essence, in their being, right? They're dependent in their existence, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
Dependent. Yeah. So, are you talking about like a conditional sort of look at truth? If I might
Well,
ask.
well, actually, I'm speaking more directly now toward ontology, the being that
Okay.
this type of being that we have, we are dependent in our existence.
Uh,
So, in other words, I'm saying that we are all effects. If you want to talk about causality, right? We are all effects. Everything that we see is that which changes is contingent or dependent by its existence. That's what it means to change. Every time something changes, something outside of it has affected or lorded, in a sense, over them in order for them to be what they are. They had like I'm potentially bald. I mean, I used to have a lot more hair. I'm almost bald now, and so I'm actually bald. But before I was potentially bald. And so what I did is I moved from potential baldness to actual baldness, and I had to have certain things act upon me in order for me to be in this position that I am at the particular baldness that I experience right now. So you
I
cannot.
don't want to detract too much, but could you define for me what you mean by potentially bold?
But it's a state of being that can actually be, but is not actually yet. For example, my hand can be potentially higher than it is right now. It just did. I just actualized that height for my hand. I
The
just
reason I would
actualized it.
feel that that's not perhaps the best corresponding and why it's not analogous though is that you were never bald before you were bald, whereas you've risen your hand as well as you've seen others do it, so you probably imagine you could do it as well. But you specifically, if we're only looking at you, you've raised your hand at this level before, I'm assuming, right? So the idea that this is potentially this, um, I don't see how that's the case. I think that you knew that you could actually lift your hand here because you have examples of it. You were never bald before you were bald. You had,
No,
actually.
but the point I'm trying to make is that which is marked by change is dependent in existence. In other words, I can actualize things because I'm an agent. All right, agents can actualize things, but when that agent actualizes something, they are also acted upon in themselves. I just was talking about this in church Sunday. We were talking about it's called actin potency. Okay, I can actualize dentations in the sand when I walk on the beach. Okay. And I actualize that sand to a position of what it is when my footprint goes in there. But also, if you look at the bottom of my foot, you will also see that sand made indentations on me. It affected me as well. So I was both it's called act and patience. I'm using a Thomistic philosophy, which is Aristotelian. Act and patience or act and potency. I was the one who exerted something. I was a causal force, but I was also affected as I did that. And so I do have the ability to causally start things. Like you were right in saying that I chose to do this here and I didn't choose to do this here, but I'm focusing on the fact that both of those entail change. And I, in my being, am a type of person that I was an effect before I was a cause. Would you agree with that?
I'm so sorry. I'm being such a jerk here, and I do apologize earlier. I know that you were actually making a point with that, and I did understand the point. But I appreciate you continuing to flesh that out, regardless, because it does help. Um, so, if you don't mind, actually, I would ask that you repeat the very tail end. But if you don't mind, before you do, I'm going to adjust the lighting a little bit because I can barely see my screen. So, I'm sorry about that.
Sure.
All right, well, you gotta go. Okay. Uh, worth it. It's just not worth it. Okay, so I apologize again for that. So can you please
Awesome.
teach me just that tail in there, if you wouldn't mind?
Well, I was saying that the point I'm trying to make is that we are ourselves causal agents. We can cause things to happen because we're personal. We can have a goal. I can eat an apple, and for example, I can actualize the destruction of the apple. But I also, before I can act upon something, I myself was an effect. So the very first part of my existence is that I am an effect. In other words, I didn't cause my own existence. I was brought into existence apart from my volition. Would you agree with that? When you were born.
So your conclusion is that your existence draws upon factors that draw upon the existence of ultimately. Are you suggesting like
Well,
a kind of like an endless chain where the first link draws upon ultimately the final link?
Yeah, you can't have an infinite chain of effects without causes. So if you have something that is changing, then there must be something somewhere somehow that does not change, something that has pure actuality in and of itself, that is not dependent upon something else. Because whenever I start this conversation with people, I always ask them for two presuppositions, and they are not. I could spend so much time. I want to be as quickly as I can here, though, because I got to go here pretty soon. But I start out with two presuppositions. You got to give me the law of non-contradiction, and you've got to give me the basic reliability of sense perception. Those are my epistemological tools that I can't know anything. If I can't rationally relate the propositions, then there's no way to inquire. And if I cannot have sense perception, at least enough to know that I exist, I mean, this whole world could be fake. I could be a solipsist, but as long as I know that I myself exist and I know that I change, then I know that I am not self-existent. And so through modus ponens, or through extrapolation, by looking at the effect of something by way of causality, I know that there must be something that gives me my existence. And that thing that gives me my existence ultimately cannot be that which changes, because again, you can't have an eternal chain or an infinite chain of effects without causes. You've got to have something that actualizes ultimately that which is an effect.
Mm-hmm. No, I think I get you. Yeah, I think I get you.
So I've been using this argument for. I don't know if you ever heard of R.C. Sproul. I'm a big fan of R.C. Sproul.
A lot of these things are very familiar, and I mean, there's even other philosophers that you could relate the whole chain thing using that.
Well, I'm basically using Thomistic philosophy. That's his third. Thomas has 5 ways, and his third way is a way of causality.
Okay, I didn't know about that. I didn't know about him in particular, and
yeah, and so I'm not a presuppositionalist. I call myself a classicist, and that's not an evidentialist. Usually, there's two. You talk about either evidential or presuppositional. I'm a classicist, which is I am dealing with certainty. I'm looking for certainty. Presuppositionalist is looking for certainty as well. And presuppositionalists are normally rationalists. They're using rational argumentation through TAG, transcendental argument.
Yeah.
Evidentialists are empiricists, and you cannot get certainty with empiricism. All you can get is probability. So empiricists are probability people.
But I think I get what you're saying.
Well, and I'm a classicist, though. It's kind of a hybrid between the two. I am dealing with
and not to be confused with classical theism, correct?
Well, classicists, they're related. Classicists are generally going to be adherents to classical theism. Classicists are generally going to be historical in their perspective. Usually what you'll find is evidentialists are going to usually be Arminian, and they're going to have a very sloppy theology proper, most of them. But someone who's a classicist or someone who's a presuppositionalist, they usually have a pretty good theology proper. Yeah, some presuppositionalists are bad.
And though I don't think it's unexpected per se, I think it is kind of funny and sad, ironic, however you want to look at it, because given the bulk of apologetics has been done on the the stage of the evidentialist, but also not. And I think when you're talking about something like apologetics, I don't know that there is a independently verifiable mechanism. In other words, I don't believe that they are implying a methodology that is held accountable by any external mechanism, if you call it. And as such, which is what we would expect, as such, you have often, and there's been cases of this all throughout apologetics that I've seen. A lot of times the presuppositionalist and the evidentialist will use the same arguments. It's just that there's more of an emphasis on one than the other. So. And often they'll denounce one. But regardless, and again, I think this has a lot to do with the fact that it's murky territory, to say the least. It's not to say it's unknowable or everything's unknowable, or that there aren't, a lot of scholarly, work involved, or that there is a lot of scholarly work involved. I know there is. Um, but like you have someone like Frank Turek, for example, he
Mhm.
uses the presuppositionalist argument, but he's easily one of the biggest evidentialists, or at least he's been.
Yeah, you're right.
And I don't want to say, oh, this person's that, and because I don't get to say who is what necessarily, and I know that everybody has a chance to
Well, I
change
think
them.
he would probably agree with you.
Yeah, and I think he's actually technically because I know he wasn't always, but I think now he has since come out as saying he's a presuppositionalist.
Mhm.
Good for him. You have an evidentialist. They, um, an evidentialist does not. You don't. Okay, so if you're presuppositionalist, as you know, you presuppose that thing, and you do not set out to give evidence for it.
Right.
Whereas if you're an evidentialist, you don't have a presupposition. You actually are providing evidence. So that would make them mutually exclusive positions. But
That's
that
exactly
often,
right.
again, is not the case that we find. And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that it's a kind of sloppy, um, well, not even speaking to whether or not it's sloppy or how sloppy, there's not that same kind of independently verifiable mechanism that can keep any apologetic method on the straight and narrow. And in other words, at best, they're going to cultivate a sort of internal consistency, something that allows their chosen or adopted otherwise theological narrative to continue, but it says nothing in and of itself about whether or not it is any bit externally true. In other
See, I
words,
don't see. I don't agree with that because a
you have
true
to allow.
evidentialist is not going to allow his. Most of them do, and I think it is. You're exactly right, and you point out something I think is very important that
Mhm.
presuppositionalism and evidentialism are mutually exclusive. And I always tease my presuppositionalist friends. I say the moment that you employ the transcendental argument for God, that's an a posteriori. That's an after the fact argument, and they'll say, well, you've got to start with God's beginning and then you can use evidences. If you really believe that men have the true knowledge of God fully without evidence, why would you use it? And at that moment, when you start using evidence in any way, you are an evidentialist, and both of them are exclusive. You can't be both. Either you presuppose or you evidence. One is a priori, one is a posteriori. You
Yeah.
cannot be both. And I see people jumping back and forth and stuff, and and I'm not meaning to slam anybody, but it's just sloppy thinking.
Right.
And the
Yeah,
problem,
it's unexamined. Yeah, and
and
that's
it
a
needs to be
problem.
examined. And I don't think that we need to sit there. We don't need to play any games with mind games with why we're doing anything. The problem with presuppositionalism is it confuses the order of being with the order of knowing. Certainly, it is true that God is necessary for all the things that they argue for, but you cannot. We don't have the mind of God, so we can't start with God. We don't have God's ego. We are dependent creatures, so that we have to start epistemologically. They confuse metaphysics with epistemology. We have to start epistemologically with ourselves because that's all we've got. We
Yeah, I
don't
would agree.
have God's consciousness. Now, we do have the image of God written in us, I believe, in the moral law. It's written within us, but we learn that by reflection upon that. Okay, we don't know the triune God apart from Scripture. The Bible doesn't teach that. It teaches that we know there's a creator, but it doesn't teach that we know the triune God apart from Scripture. We don't. We only know a creator who is holy and that we are sinful. We know enough to damn us, but we don't, according to Romans 1 and 2, we don't know enough to save us. And but even that is learned by reflection. We're thinking about these things because we don't start with God's consciousness. We don't have his ego. We have to start with our own ego. People get all upset. The reason people like presuppositionalists so much is because it sounds very pious. It's tremendously pious, but it's very sloppy thinking. In fact, I think with the recovery of classical theism, we are seeing a demise of presuppositionalism. I want to make a prediction that you're going to
So
watch
resurgence,
presuppositionalism go down.
it'll fade like it did before. I mean, you've had these spurts since then, till I feel like, and within the last decade or so, I felt like, and again, this is like I'm trying to intuit it,
Mhm.
which I don't know that I can do, but it does certainly feel like it's more of a resurgence. So you could be quite right that it's going to fade and fall away.
Well, this classical theism, the recovery of that is literally becoming mainstream in the last several months, not years. But I think it's coming on. So one of my one of my very good friends from church. He was a presuppositionalist, and in fact, we just did a debate. You can find it on my YouTube page if you look around there, and with a couple atheists here locally. And he used to be a staunch Van Tillian presuppositionalism. He started studying theology proper and became a classical theist, and he has completely abandoned presuppositionalism because he sees it. You're begging the question. It's an informal fallacy with presuppositionalism. You're assuming the very thing you're trying to prove, and you can't do that. It's not going to impress anybody except your own Christian friends.
Let me jump in just real quick because I do want to throw this concept out as I think that it's been more than once something that should be brought up just with everything you've been saying. How does then? Well, I'll just ask you. How does, in your view, then the idea of a revelation from God and that being the means by which you can, as they say, account for, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, because that's not something that they've ever demonstrated, nor is it something that they could. I mean, it's possible that it could never be done because you're essentially working with something that is, in essence, unique to them. And even if they believe that we could all potentially have one, you know, as it's been said before by people much smarter than myself, where is my Damascus Road experience? You know, and why should I even, wait for that? You know, shouldn't I wait for reason and evidence like I would with just about any other claim?
Sure. I don't think you should accept. The Bible says, 1 Thessalonians 5:21, test all things. That means doubt. Doubt all things. Hold fast to that which is true.
Yeah, and I love that verse, and I'm glad you brought that up. Unfortunately, though, I feel, and whether they're grounded, and then they're whether they're grounded biblically or not, often that gets poo-pooed away, right. and they'll say, oh, well, you're taking it out of context, and which is just absurd because even if that's the case, something like test everything, hold on to the good. Mm-hmm. What we're pulling away from that's meaningful and valuable is demonstrably meaningful and valuable, and thus transcends the Bible in any context it's in, regardless. So yeah, if you're trying to understand what exactly the author meant when they wrote that, who they wrote it for.
Yeah, but you're presupposing that the Bible is false in that statement.
Oh, sorry, which statement?
That you said that it transcends the Bible.
I mean, in terms of okay, so let's say I never even heard of the Gospels or Christianity before. I don't know why I quoted Gospels. Mm-hmm. Let's say, though, that I've never even heard of Christianity, right?
Okay.
So I don't have a presupposition against it. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sorry. Why did you think that I was? Yeah, can we just go back? I don't want to get ahead of myself.
I thought you said something about the experience needed to transcend the Bible.
Well, what I meant by transcend, I just meant, it's an ethic. It's a principle that not only can be viewed, understood, and, carried out externally from Christianity, from the Bible. And in that sense, it transcends. But there are also older religions, for example, that have similar, if not, near identical ideas to the principle behind testing everything and holding on to the good. The idea of separating.
Yeah, but you do know that Christianity grew out of Judaism, right?
Right, but I wasn't just talking about Judaism.
And you know that Judaism goes back to the beginning of creation, right?
I don't know that, but regardless.
Well, I'm saying that's purportedly. I mean, Christianity begins with the creation of mankind. So there would not be an older religion.
There's a lot of claims. I understand that's your belief, though. Well,
I'm just saying that's what's purported. So to say that there are other religions before Christianity, well, you're presupposing a falsity of Christianity in order to verify that statement.
Do you think then, because my point, I didn't mean to just, and I appreciate what you're saying because that's your belief, and it's important to be aware of these things because the more common ground we have, the longer the conversation lasts. So then I want to ask you, because I didn't just mean older religions. I did say that, and I do believe that, but regardless, there's just the idea of, here's some things, I'm going to hold on to the good things while the bad things I allow to fall away. I mean, that's not particularly I don't want to overreach here. I believe that concept was at least at one point appreciated and codified in some sense of the word before it appeared in the Bible. And one last point, even if it hadn't, demonstrates if you would. Um, Although I guess you didn't necessarily say it had to, but I have yet to see a demonstration of such a tenet, or I don't think it's a tenet. I wouldn't. Please demonstrate to me that such an idea, such a principle of holding on to the good, letting the bad fall away, demonstrate how the Bible was necessary in order to reach that, or show me how we couldn't get that without the Bible, I guess. And granted, I know that you didn't necessarily assert that that was the case, but that
Well,
being said, we don't need the Bible because it is demonstrably a.
no. Okay, well, there's two separate things here. I mean,
Sure.
Thomas Aquinas had a thing he called the preambles of faith and the articles of faith, and he said the preambles of faith everyone can know. That means everybody. That's Romans 1 and 2. That means that we all know there's a creator, and we all know that we are sinful. We all know that there's a holy standard that we don't hold on, that we don't keep the way that we should. All right, those can damn you, but they can't save you. But the message of salvation is the article of faith. That's not a preamble of faith. And everybody does not know all the articles of faith. Only those to whom are revealed God's message specifically. And that is codified and expressed in the scriptures, the Bible itself. So salvation is not given to everyone. It's only given to certain people.
Okay, yeah, and so are you a Calvinist? If you don't mind me, I mean, I know there are lots of.
Yes.
Okay, well, I won't assume you're a moral monster, and I'll just really nice.
Well, you can demonstrate it. That's fine. If you can demonstrate it, more power to you.
Well, if I okay, well, so you are, you seem like a nice guy, so I wouldn't, chew you out for being a Calvinist. I don't necessarily affirm the counterpositive. I don't necessarily look at the other positions and view them to be like particularly better or something. I've often seen Calvinists who became presuppositionalists, and
Yes.
I'm recognizing that as a correlation, not necessarily.
Presuppositionalism is something that usually corresponds with Calvinism.
Yeah, as you would expect. I have a couple of questions. I appreciate that you're giving me sort of these ideas that that Thomas handed down, and his observations, his understanding, his just his thoughts, I guess you'd say, on it, for lack of a better word. I do appreciate that. It's probably one of the few times that someone's brought up that chap, and I've not been just upset, because it's often when trying to establish that somehow we can know that Christianity was somehow at the foundation of this country, and that it was responsible for the moral foundation, as it's often put, for this country. But just going back to what you were saying, I want to ask you, you're not a presuppositionalist, which is what you said. Okay, but you do have some, or at least one active presupposition, right? Like you presuppose the laws of logic, correct?
Okay, well, yeah, that's a very important distinction to make.
We don't have to get into laws of logic.
Well, let me just say though that my presuppositions are epistemological and not propositional. That's the difference. Presuppositionalism presupposes the argument. I am not presupposing an argument. Right. I am presupposing the instruments by which we gain information, and that does not commit an informal fallacy. Presuppositionalism does commit an informal fallacy. I just wanted to.
Correct. No, and I'm sorry, I'm just getting excited here. But I was just basically trying to say, because it's not a crime to have working functional presuppositions.
You have to have them.
Yeah, exactly.
Not like the presuppositionalists say, though.
Sorry?
Not like the presuppositionalists do, though. Right. They commit a fallacy. I'm not committing a fallacy.
It's like a dysfunctional presupposition that doesn't correspond or inform their perspective in reality. It doesn't correspond to reality. It doesn't inform them in any kind of
similarly. Yes, mine doesn't. Mine doesn't inform my argument. It just is a way to discover.
But presupposing the laws of logic, though you did put that qualifier in there, but presupposing the laws of logic, the laws of thought, on the other hand, that actually does inform our experience. That actually is a functioning presupposition. Okay, I just wanted to get that up because I think it would seem that you do still nonetheless presuppose that everybody believes in God, and that God is
no,
or a creator.
I discover that. I don't presuppose. That's my conclusion. That's not my starting point.
Well, okay, so because I was going to relate it back to what Thomas says, um, what you had just quoted him on saying in regards to how everybody kind of like in a similar way.
They
What
are revealed to everybody, but that's not. It's not something man does not know without reflection. We reflect on creation and we say, oh, there's a creation. There must be a creator.
Okay, well then I'll start there because what I was trying to get to was it seemed to be an accepted prescription, something that you've accepted and or were using in your worldview, I guess you call it, as a presupposition that everybody believes. As it says, no one is without excuse. That's what I'm drawing upon, and I apologize if this is very.
Well, I come to my argument with you with that presupposition. I am convinced that you are suppressing the truth, but I don't start there. Through my own inquiry, understanding, and also through almost 10 years of doing
So
this,
in
I've
like a
seen it.
discussion or debate, you might start there. If
No,
only.
I don't want to start there because it's not helpful. I want to demonstrate to you so that you can come to that conclusion yourself through your own inquiry. This is my problem with presuppositionalism. It basically says, believe what I say because I say so. That's essentially what they're saying.
Like,
I do not want to do that
God
with you.
complex, like 101, like just like glaringly obvious, like, oh,
Yeah.
like,
And when you come to somebody and say, you know my position, just admit it. That's not very helpful. I mean, and you're not going to be thinking, okay, I really want to think about the way what this person was saying. But in the final analysis, really all they're doing is they're standing over you saying, believe me on my authority because I tell you it's true. And that's dangerous. I think that's the same thing that informed the 9/11 bombers. We need to never just do something. Again, test all things. Hold fast to that which is true.
I'm so glad you said that because that leads me to, what I'm going to ask you instead.
Okay.
Because I determined now that, that is a presupposition of yours. I understand that, you want to reason together, and I appreciate that. That makes you, very set apart. And I appreciate it to the extent that we can be aware of these things, these tendencies, what have you, that we, try to work together. And why not get an atheist to help you with that? Why not look to the atheist community to sharpen, yes, iron sharpens iron, as it says, but of course, the quote unquote atheist communities that there are, why not, use them to help sharpen your theology?
It's the heretics that have built the church to make it what it is because it pushes us to sharpen our own perspective.
Yeah. So that is a presupposition. I do appreciate, though, that yes, you value, not just blindly giving yourself way and advocating your own, mind and humanity, et cetera, et cetera. But that is a presupposition. That's the point I wanted to make. I've yet to see that to be something, though, that does correspond to what we observe in reality. In other words, I don't see it being something that informs us particularly, and I don't see or useful in that way. And I actually see it coming into contradiction with what we actually observe, which is, for example, there's I think it's an Amazonian tribe. I literally just heard the name a couple of days ago. It's already not in my recall. But there is a tribe that essentially exists. They have no God concept. Sociologists, they've determined that they have no God concept whatsoever. How do you feel about that? I mean, do you think that they're merely suppressing the truth and unrighteousness, or
well, let me ask you: does that tribe value existence?
Sorry, say again.
Does that tribe value existence? Do they have rules within their tribe to protect existence?
Yeah, and without even knowing much at all about the tribe, I would have to say that at bottom, I'm sure that.
Well, if they didn't, they wouldn't exist, right?
Exactly. My point that I was going to say is, yeah, I mean, a society that doesn't value, and I'm really glad that even though you, I guess, are a Christian, you can actually, you're honest enough to admit when something makes sense, like life being preferential, generally speaking, to death, is a perfectly suitable foundation.
No, it's not a foundation. It's a conclusion. In other words, how do you justify that? If you watch my debate I had with our interlocutors, I was asking that. I said, if it is true that there is a moral code, which means that we should value life, how do you justify that moral code coming about unintentionally? Because unintentionality cannot intend intentional.
Well, I don't know that that's necessarily the case. We don't want to commit the black swan fallacy and say just because I haven't seen an example of something that therefore that
No, it's
thing
logical. It's logical. You
but,
cannot take
you
the
know,
like
that it's impossible or that it is necessarily the case that it is not true or that it is false. That would require
it's an analytical statement to say that unintentionality brought forth intentionality is irrational because unintentionality is unintentional by definition.
Holding the belief would be irrational, yes, because we do not have justification for that. That's all I'm saying. I'm just quibbling, propositional logic quibbling, you know, because not true. The something being not
You
true.
can't say 2 + 2 = 3. You cannot say an effect happens without a cause. Those are both analytical statements because the only way you can speak of an effect is to invoke the concept of cause. The only way you can define a cause is to invoke the concept of effect. So it's true by definition. This is something.
We have causes and we have effects, and through the process of, as I've said earlier, the understanding why something as an explanation for a cause, why this explanation is a demonstrably sufficient and demonstrably necessary. So it needs necessity and sufficiency. That's why we know something is the cause of something else. The idea of a cause in and of itself,
yes,
as being something that cannot come about, or excuse me, the idea of an effect coming about without a cause in and of itself, that's an assertion that you would need to demonstrate the reasonableness of, because saying something is not true, in other words, we have no good reason to think that a cause, or excuse me, we have no good reason to think that an effect, let me slow down. We have no good reason to think that an effect could come about without a cause. That's not the same thing as saying, therefore, it is impossible or it is necessarily the case that a cause can come about, or excuse me, an effect
can come about without a
cause. Sorry?
Yeah, that you no, you're not you're misunderstanding what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Do you know the difference between an analytical proposition and a synthetic proposition?
Right, okay. Just wanted to ramble on about that.
Well, yeah, but you're wrong in it. Do you know the difference between an analytical and a synthetic statement?
You'll have to refresh.
Okay, an analytical statement is one that is true by definition. In other words, it's tautological.
Right. So it's sorry.
Like a triangle has 3 sides. That's analytically true. It's not something that could be true. It must be true by definition. A bachelor is an unmarried man because you're just repeating yourself. Okay, causality is an analytical statement. As I stated earlier, you cannot define a cause without invoking the concept of effect, and vice versa.
True.
And if you think that you can, I want you to do that for me right now.
Well,
define for me a cause without invoking an effect.
Sure, and I would agree with you. We know that it's not. Yeah, I think maybe I did actually go off in a tangent. This was not probably the best time to hit that propositional point. I was just, but yes, you seem to clearly understand set theory, propositional logic. I was just trying to illustrate the point that there's a difference between X is not true and X is false, which I'm assuming you do get. As far as cause and effect go, well, by the way, if that doesn't make sense or you dispute that, let me know. I don't want to move on. Does that make sense at least? Even if it doesn't apply to what you had said, I happily will move on to what you were talking about. But does at least the idea that saying something is not true, so X is not true, it's not the same or equal to.
Yes, I agree with that, but it doesn't apply to causality because causality is true by definition.
Part of the conversation either. I agree, and I do.
I totally agree with that. yes. Okay. So sufficiency is not necessity.
Second.
Sufficiency is not
right.
A necessary condition is not the same thing as a sufficient condition.
Right, and that alone puts you. Again, thank you for taking the time to go over that nuanced distinction because it's very important. And a lot of people either just aren't used to thinking in those terms, which is totally understandable. It's not really in our culture much. And it's just generally clear thinking, but I don't want to bash culture more than I already do. Anyway, can I ask you then, do you believe cause and effect and that relationship is dependent upon, do you believe cause and effect is necessarily temporal?
Yes, because it's a measurement of change, and
Okay.
time is just the measurement of contingent matter moving.
Oh,
That's all we. I don't know exactly what the ontology of time is, other than to say how I experience it. And the only way I experience time is watching matter moving. Our clocks are set. It used to be planetary, movement as the celestial bodies moved. Now they moved it to atomic because it's a little more accurate, and we measure the way neutrons or protons or something going around the nucleus of an atom at that
yeah.
speed. So we're watching change between contingent matter. So outside of contingency, there is no such thing as time or as
Right. And,
change.
and, and yeah, I'm regretting saying time when I could have just said space. Not that they're synonymous or interchangeable, universally. They're not. It's obviously
Yeah, they're different,
very different.
but
And
they're
time, I think, is
related
more
directly.
complicated. That makes any sense, but also is not necessary. I should have said space because my what I'm leading to here is am I correct in assuming that you're applying this because if we're looking at, for example, before our known local presentation of the universe,
Mm-hmm.
before that, if that question makes sense, which is my point here,
Mm-hmm.
does it even make sense to try and apply something like a cause and effect relationship
Sure,
to something
because
where there's no space and time? If that is in fact what cause and effect rely on.
yes, because cause and effect only came into existence at the beginning. This is what Stephen Hawking said on page 21, I think, of The Nature and Space and Time. He said, almost everyone now believes that the universe and time itself had a beginning at the Big Bang.
The local present. I made sure to use, and I'm not an authority in this field or really any field. I'm not. I'm certainly not a cosmologist. I'm not a physicist. Believe it or not, but I can't let something go by. Um, I did make sure to say local presentation of the universe, as opposed to like what could be, called something like, the greater cosmos that is. I am making a distinction, however sloppily I am making it, between that, the greater cosmos, and something like our local presentation of the universe. Our local presentation of the universe may have had a beginning, may have had a beginning. That is, I think, currently the consensus, but it's at best.
Okay. Is the cosmos outside of our local presentation moving or changing?
I don't know.
Well, then you're basically agreeing with me. And you're saying this local presentation is the universe we know, and that which the full cosmos is God.
Well, we've been given indication to think though that. Well, I don't know. It's fair to say that the full broader cosmos is God because I think that that's still, among other things, that violates Occam's razor to say
No, it doesn't.
God.
It's the only thing. No, it's the only sustaining thing for Occam's razor.
Well, that's an
You're
argument.
violating parsimony by invoking a violation of the law of non-contradiction by denying it.
Can you flesh
Occam's
that
razor
out?
only works with that which is rationally coherent.
Well, because you're making an appeal to God as an explanation for the greater cosmos that is, and maybe
Right, because the cosmos is an effect. You can't have an
it is.
effect without a cause.
I don't know that that's been determined now.
Well, I
That the
just
greater
demonstrated to you.
No, I mean the greater cosmos that is, because look, this is usually I think where the argument would go to something like, you know, quantum physics, for example, which is just all the more something I'm not qualified to speak on. But I do know roughly that this is often where quantum physics gets brought up because we're talking about is a supernatural explanation. Mind you, supernatural is vague. We don't have any known examples documented. And that's important to know, though, because we have nothing else to pull from, quote unquote, supernatural. And yet you would posit that, which God is, I imagine, you believe supernatural, correct?
Well, because nature is contingent. You can't have contingencies being self-existent because it's not.
I mean, we have examples of particles coming in and out of existence, do we not?
No,
Uh,
that's lazy science, what you call. Niels Bohr was very lazy in his science. Albert Einstein would fight with him. He said, if God doesn't play dice, if he does, I'd rather work in a gaming hall or be a cobbler. Niels Bohr embraced contradiction in the Copenhagen School, I think, of dealing with those things. And it's foolishness. It's lazy science. We don't understand quantum mechanics, but that doesn't mean that something makes itself before it exists.
Some people do actually understand it.
No, they don't. Nobody understands it. But we need to keep.
Krauss just throwing all these. Granted, he's like this, fluffed up celebrity, but that's, it's like Neil deGrasse Tyson. It's the same idea. It's like he's a celebrity, cultural icon.
That's right. He's a celebrity. He's not that deep.
But they're scientists. They are, but they are scientists, to be fair, as well. And I don't know that the consensus of the scientific community with respect to those specific fields of the hard sciences, like I assume quantum theory, quantum mechanics. Well, I guess it wouldn't be. Regardless, science in general, or if you're talking about like the specific hard sciences, and even the softer sciences like history. Well, actually, no, we're leaving history out because that's messy. I just wanted to illustrate the point that you were making an appeal to a supernatural explanation, when isn't just by definition a natural explanation always going to be the more simple?
No, because the natural explanation is contingent. I mean, this is real simple.
Well, but how do you demonstrate that though?
Because it changes.
What changes?
The natural nature is changing, right? That means it's contingent by definition. It's not self-existent. It is dependent existence. You get two categories: self-existence, contingency, or dependent existence. Okay, and you cannot have the dependent existence without self-existence. Naturalism posits contingent existence. Okay, and then it says that's all there is. It's really, really easy to say that's silly. It violates Occam's razor. Yes, because it's
methodological naturalism. But and I'm not a philosophical naturalist.
Either one, both of them, because philosophical deals with logic, and methodological deals with physical, the physical universe. So it doesn't. Both of those are irrational. It doesn't matter.
I think though, when we're talking about an explanation, what explanatory power does saying it's and you even said, I think at one point, because I was referring to like the greater cosmos that is, and there are other names that it's been given. But you basically, I think at one point said that is God, or basically, if that isn't God, then God created that.
No, God didn't create that. That which is self-existent. Because if God created something, then it would be contingent, and it would be no different than the creation. It would be a creation.
Right. So exactly. So what I would say, my definition of, now as I understand the greater cosmos would be, right, it wouldn't be contingent. But I'm saying that you actually had, because I think you would believe that if there is a greater cosmos, it would be contingent on coming into existence.
Well, it wouldn't make any difference, because it'd be just like our local cosmos.
Right. Okay. So
So we're not talking about matter. We're talking about being when we're making these distinctions. And it cannot be material, because material is contingent by definition, because it's defined or subject to space.
Well, I'm sorry. What are you saying? Can't be matter?
Matter cannot be unchanging because it is limited or defined by space.
Oh, I mean, I guess I could at least tentatively accept that. I know that a lot of our earlier, understanding of what matter is.
Matter is extended in space by definition, is it not?
Say again?
Matter has extension.
I don't know that. I would need to know exactly what you mean by that statement, though.
You could define it otherwise. Go ahead.
No, I mean, it doesn't matter to me, because you're the one that's trying to convey a meaning here.
I made an assertion, and you're questioning. I'm saying, go ahead and prove me wrong.
Oh, no. Well, first of all, if I can't prove you wrong, that doesn't in and of itself.
Well, for this conversation, it does.
True.
I could be wrong about everything.
Well, everything? Is all knowledge connected to all other knowledge? This is where the presuppers fall down, and where I like to, try to at one point steer the conversation.
I can't have 100% certainty about God's existence. However, I do have more certainty about God than I have about your existence. It's more certain to me because it's an analytic reality. Your existence before me right now is an empirical reality. I could be wrong. I could be just imagining this conversation. It's not real.
Well, but I mean that's a bit disingenuous. So I mean to say that I see what you're saying.
I'm
You're
just speaking of
saying
level of certainty. Hey, before I forget, you're not related to Peter Boghossian, right?
that it took you like how much time was in at this?
Well, you only have one
But
S in your name. He has two.
if only, yeah, I know he has the two S's. Sometimes they'll spell it without an H, the Bogosian. But you know, if you have an IAN or a YAN at the end of your last name, you got an Armenian, which I'm half, and
Uh-huh.
I think he's full. But you know, so I wish I was related, but no, unfortunately. But I am, you know, maybe the prodigy. No, um,
Okay.
when you say that you believe God's existence, you're not just talking about a vague concept of God. You're talking about your accepted. Granted, yes, perhaps because of subsequent reasons or what you view as being subsequent reasons after you've accepted the fact that or the idea that there's a God that exists.
Mm-hmm.
You currently hold this position that you believe in a Judeo-Christian Yahweh, the God of the Bible,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
Okay, I was just wondering because it's not always clear, and I find that sometimes there's an intention to leave it unclear because then you can kind of pivot back from one to the other when
No.
it's
Well, here's what I'm doing. My argument rests upon simply a creator, not the Judeo-Christian God. And some people get upset and they say, well, my God is so much more than the God of creation or, maybe Aristotle's first mover. And I say, yes, he is more than that, but he's not less. And so we can start right there. And it's an analytical truth. This is what Thomas was talking about with his preambles of the faith. Everybody knows the preambles. There's not one sentient human being that does not know that there's a God.
I don't. Or if we're begging the question, I mean, or if we're
I
if
didn't
we're
beg the
dragging in
question.
the baggage of
You know through causality that you are not self-existent.
that's separate from saying therefore there's a specific God. Particularly if we're going to define God as X
Is
Y
there,
Z. How are we?
Adam, is there such a thing as right and wrong?
Yeah. Well, hold on, because there are subjective frameworks that we form, and many of ours,
And how did we
because
do
we've
that?
accepted a common, what you might call worldview, or epistemology, they have overlap with others. We're all human beings, so we would expect there to be differences, but of course also commonalities. And with
And you
respect
need to explain
to,
that commonality.
well, because with respect to certain pre-designated goals within our different frameworks, which again often overlap,
We all have the
some
same goal. It's called existence.
we had that as
You're
a
an
goal.
atheist because you want to
Well,
save the
generally,
phenomenon of existence. I'm sorry?
say again, sir.
I say you're an atheist. You're a humanist because you want to save the phenomenon of existence. That's what you're about. You're living your life for salvation. You're trying to,
Right.
you
I don't.
think this life is all there is, but as far as this life goes, your whole goal, you wake up every morning to think, how can I save the phenomenon of existence? Why is that?
No, that would be like if I was a secular humanist saint. But I mean, I
No,
do.
you may be really bad at it, but you want to save the phenomenon of existence. Don't you want to live as long as you can?
Yeah, it's a desire that I have, and I would even go so far as to say it's a desire I do always have, even if I suffer from that, or if
Why is that?
or like before my coffee or something. Before I have my coffee, I don't really care about anyone's existence.
No, because you want to have that coffee.
What's that?
You know, you got to have that coffee. That's part of the saving the
that's what
phenomenon.
I know. I know I'm a drug addict. I know I need coffee.
No, I'm saying no, but you drink the coffee so that you can function because you want to. You're programmed for that.
Well, there are long-term goals and short-term goals that are simultaneously in effect. I want to get rid of my headache. I want to not feel like complete garbage. Right. But in the long term, yes, I'd like to be able to be somewhat productive during the day if I can. And yes, I do know coffee will help with that.
You even said that we are stewards of this planet.
Yeah, well, at the point I was trying to be, I forget exactly what I was talking in regards to, but I was at that moment, I recall trying to say something that was benign enough to incorporate, both Christian and secularists, because
that's right, all of us.
Even if you're a Christian, I mean, depending upon your accepted theology, you may or may not believe. Well, actually, I've yet to speak to a Christian who, if they are, quote unquote Bible believing, who didn't affirm the idea that they are in fact they have dominion over the planet. That it's a gift, but it's like you have dominion over it. Anyway, I get up in the morning and I think the things I'm thinking, because that's how we live our lives, is by inference and induction. And we form patterns, or excuse me, we form behavioral patterns based upon our experiences and what of course is going on right now. And additionally, our anticipations. I mean, we have a mind that can even do such a thing. Not all brains that we observe seem to support such a cognitive faculty to be able to anticipate the way that we do. But that's really neither here nor there, because I don't believe as you do. But what I find to be somewhat disingenuous, whether it's meant by Christians, evangelical apologists or not, is when they essentially do what you're doing now, which is advocating this idea of an amorphous blob God, saying you do believe that, and then you pivot to the more specific Judeo-Christian God of the Bible, which
I have not gone to the Christian God yet, my friend. I have asked you to give me a justification for your desire to save the phenomenon of existence. How do you explain that?
Oh, I didn't recall you actually asking me that question.
Several times. I said, you're saving the phenomenon of existence. How do you justify that?
Okay. I'm just saying I wasn't intentionally trying to dodge you. I'm just now made aware that I'm really oblivious. So I apologize. I'll be happy to answer. So one last time, if you wouldn't mind, ask me again the question.
Okay, so you have this determination in your life. All humans do. We all hold this in common. Now, we different cultures have different moral codes, and there's difficulties in figuring out some things, what's right and what's wrong. But every single society of mankind on this earth has within themselves this moral code that says that existence is special and that it should be saved. And that includes conservation of this planet and taking care of things and looking out for ourselves and looking out for others. And when we don't, we say people that don't do that, we say they are pathological. They're broken. There's something wrong with them. So I want you to tell me how it is that we have a moral code unintentionally.
Okay. How we have a moral code unintentionally. Well, so to be fair, though I do again appreciate really you fleshing this stuff out, explaining your meaning, because that's almost always preferred more so than anything else. Just I want to know what you mean, so we can talk in our terms and terms that we more importantly understand. So we're not talking past one another. That said, that was a mighty preface, don't you think? I mean, that was a lot of padding, I feel, for that question. I mean, you kind of threw out a pretty loaded question. I don't agree with some of the.
You don't have an answer, do you?
No, I don't agree with.
I sense that you're just kind of.
I don't know why. So if we're talking about morality, that's a term that, like every other term, to some degree, is not inherently apparent or justified. Words don't have, for example.
You just said it was.
What was?
That we inherently, all men, try to save the phenomenon of existence. You've already conceded that.
If I did, I don't recall.
The man, remember we were talking about the men in Timbuktu or whatever, they'd never heard of God, but they still have within them this moral law. They're trying to save the phenomenon of existence. But if existence doesn't matter, why are they doing that?
Well,
where'd it come from?
It's begging the question, and this is what presuppositionalists struggle with a lot, is when I say that moral values have importance that is demonstrable, when I say that, for example, if we can agree that life is generally preferred to death, that can and does in fact serve as a basis, but that's just the basis.
And how do you justify it?
Agreed upon to have a common ground. Sorry?
Where does that common ground come from? Because nothing matters.
Well, so, and this is what I wanted to say about how presuppositionalists often run into this. It's almost like you're asking, why should we care about caring? We're social animals. We are alive and we do care about being alive.
Okay. That's a just so story. You're begging the question. You're just assuming the conclusion. You're saying we care about things because that's the way we are.
Well, but do you care about living?
I do, because I'm made in the image of God, and His intention.
How do you know that that's the cause? And how do you know that you're not just assuming the thing you need to demonstrate, and specifically
there must be a self-existent valuer for there to be such a thing as objective value.
Objective, like as in objective moral value?
If there's this concept in this universe called value, It did not arise unintentionally because value is intentional by definition.
Well, value has a different use and understanding depending upon,
But it's intentional, right? By definition. Can you have value unintentionally?
unintentionally have value?
Mm-hmm.
Like, can I have value to somebody else, for example, and not mean to have value?
Yeah.
Well, that's a weird question. I'm not even sure.
Well, value, again, it's an analytical
Yeah,
statement. To say that value, I had one of my atheists, I did a debate with one guy one time where he said, moral realism does not require a deity, is what he was saying. And I said, you lost by making the resolution, because by definition, objective moral code is something that is personal. And if it's objective, it must be something unchanging, therefore self-existent. So moral realism requires there to be a self-existent God by definition, because moral realism is valuing, it's teleological, it's purposeful. You can't have purpose without will. And if it's self-existing, if it's objective will, it's got to be self-existing.
Let's see. My phone has a purpose. Does it have a will?
Your phone doesn't have a purpose. It doesn't value things.
My phone has a purpose. Its purpose is to, among other things, call, text, and...
Okay, that's something you've imposed upon it. You created it for that.
Exactly.
It is a purposeful, but it only has a purpose that you have assigned to it, right?
Right. And is there any other kind that you're aware of?
Yeah, your purpose.
What purpose?
Your purpose that you have had to be assigned to you too as well, because you're not self-existent.
Well, I don't know that I have any one purpose, and I don't know if you're going to say...
You are a purposeful being now.
Can you demonstrate that? I mean,
yeah, the phone. You just told me the phone has value to you, therefore you are a valuer.
I value the phone, yes. I value the fact that that's how it's used. It speaks more to the form and function and the utility of it, though I wouldn't necessarily say that, like the phone, it's merely utilitarian, but...
okay, listen, Adam, I got to go. I need to go to bed.
Sure, oh yeah.
Bedtime here. But I've enjoyed talking to you. Hopefully I gave some things to think about.
You did, and I appreciate that. It always helps to have these conversations, if only for shaping how you want to go about your next conversation. If you don't mind, I'd like to just finish by saying that, because I think where this was going to go, where I was going to direct it, was the idea of situational secular morality versus this idea that moral values are quote unquote objective. I don't believe it's one or the other. It's a just to kind of speed through this, which I mean, wow, I shouldn't do that, but anyway, it's both really.
Because it is both. I agree.
Designated moral goals, like
they're both focused on the sanctity of existence. They may have differences in the way they do it. Some do it better than others, but they both have the same goal. It's salvation.
I would say that it's more specific, although maybe not a lot, but more specific than the sanctity of life, which is not a clear thing. I think human wellness and flourishing is a bit more specific, albeit also somewhat vague, which is fine because it's robust, which it would need to be to address a given situation comprehensively, wherein we don't disregard universals. It's not moral relativism. I don't advocate that. Like, for example, what a particular culture at a particular time at a particular place says is what goes.
But even moral relativists assume the sanctity of existence. That's the thing.
Well, okay, but regardless, I don't advocate that. It's nonsense. And we can know that some things are bad. If we're going to agree, a lot of this has to do with a lot of the shared assumptions we have from the start, from the get-go. And upon those assumptions, where we disagree, we can refer back to the layers, so to speak, where we actually are in agreement, where we have common ground. If we can agree that life is generally preferred to death, because yes, there are always going to be anomalies like sociopaths or people who are suicidal, as you were saying, but in different words, we generally regard those people as anomalies, as being defunct, broken, etc. Although that is separate from asserting that it is always the case. Anyway, that's really neither here nor there. So we have this common ground that life is generally preferred to death. From that point, we can move forward into gradually more and more specific and complex issues, because life is generally preferred to death is the basis. It's a
It's
very
the Sam
general.
Harris starting point. I call the petitio principii fallacy as the Sam Harris
Yeah,
fallacy.
and I would agree with all of Sam Harris. I mean, who agrees all
I
with
can't
him?
understand why anybody would buy his books, frankly.
Yeah, I'm
He's
more of a
so
Dennett
sloppy.
myself. I'm more of a Dan Dennett myself, but I like Harris because he's kind of funny. I think that's why a lot of people like him because he has comedic timing, um, and that like can be everything for you in terms of the public eye. If you have it.
Especially if you're an atheist.
What's that?
Especially if you're an atheist.
What is
They,
that?
they've got timing, but not much more.
Oh,
Christopher Hitchens had wonderful timing. He was an
oh
excellent
yeah, he was a
rhetorician,
whole
but
different style of debater. I mean, he
yeah,
wasn't,
he was great.
but yeah. Anyway, I would just want to finish by at least starting to uncover this because I feel like I was a little all over the place when really this is very important to something else, which is again the idea that we have that common ground. Life is generally preferred to death.
Mhm.
We can then move gradually into these more complex and complicated issues. And when something, for example, comes into conflict with an idea like a pre-designated goal, such as human wellness and flourishing, which is how I would define morality, because morality is not inherently a set thing. It's often used by religion, but um, anyway, if we're going to talk about a kind of morality that transcends, religious speak and what's, fiat declaration, moral prescriptions, if we're going to talk about morality, are we talking about human wellness and flourishing, even if it's put into different words? If we're at least, because even if you want your definition for morality to include other things, apart from just human wellness and flourishing, as long as it at least includes that, then we're essentially talking about, how to go about and living that does us the best justice, that is beneficial, that is doing also as you would expect, and as is the case, when we do essentially our job as humans, I guess you could call it, that has an effect outward. I mean, we've domesticated animals, and now we're like, the stewards of animals, like pets, I mean. Our morality does affect, other non-human beings, is all I'm trying to say. So we have a framework to build on. And the more we learn, the more we can better understand ourselves, our environment, and each other. And if we better understand each other, then we can better treat each other. We can't really know how to best treat something until we better understand it, the subject, as well as ourselves, how to love. Because, loving is good and important, and intention is important, and it matters. But it's also, there's something to be said about loving something the right way. And to do so, you need to have an understanding. You need to know about that thing in order to how to love it the right way, the way that it needs. So, for example, if somebody is loving on their terms, because as I'm sure as a Christian you would even agree, it's a sort of dying to yourself, figuratively speaking. And so you lift the other person up. That is best done, arguably, when one understands himself and the subject that they're loving as best as possible. And that cannot come about without a clear, defined methodology that is effective, consistently effective. And I don't think we get that from the Bible, nor do I think we get that from the supposition, that God exists and that we all know it. I don't know it. And I don't know how saying that somebody who claims they don't know it, I mean, how is that in your mind not, and forgive me because I don't think you are in any way arrogant. And also I know that I need to let you go. So if you can't answer this, that's fine. But do you not see that as arrogant? And also, how do you demonstrate it?
Okay, well, I've demonstrated several times here, and you've not answered the questions yet.
The specific idea. Because even if, let's say, for example, that it was correct, that, what you're saying about how our reality, because I'm interested in reality too. I mean, if we're just going to talk about the local presentation of the universe, there's a distinction to make, and I don't know that it's suddenly now not reasonable to make that distinction. I think that's the consensus of science. But anyway, let's say that there was a creator God. That's separate. from whether or not we all know it. My question is, how do you demonstrate it? How do you know that I know that creator God exists? Because I could just be ignorant.
Okay,
You're
well,
saying I know.
all you have to do is you have to inquire yourself. You don't need anything else in the world. All you need is yourself. And you reflect upon yourself and you say, I myself am dependent on my existence. I am an effect. I cannot have an effect without a cause. Therefore, I must have a creator. That's the first point. Second point is, I know that there is a moral code, that existence is somehow special, and that I am programmed to value existence. And since unintentionality cannot intend intentionality of value, I know that there must be a value that I'm accountable to, because there's a moral law written in my heart. Even you have conceded that much. And if there's a moral law, there's got to be a moral lawgiver.
I think that we are born, and there are people that study, for example, other social primates. They can see other examples of
they're teleological as well. They have value.
Yeah,
they're valuers.
But you're looking at that through your goggles, and I think
I'm looking through my rational goggle, just looking at saying, if there is such a thing as value, one instance, I can see a monkey eating a banana. I know, of course, not even thinking about myself observing it, but I know by looking at that monkey that there must be an objective value, or otherwise contingent value would not exist.
I don't know that I agree with that, because I
but
do.
You haven't demonstrated it to be wrong. That's the problem. Test all things, hold fast to that which is true.
What's the specific thing that you'd like me to demonstrate or walk you through? Because
how unintentionality can intend intention. How does that work?
No, that wasn't.
It's an illogical statement.
You just said something that was separate from that idea.
Well, I was talking about the monkey demonstrating teleology, or purpose. How can you have purpose or value or a goal without a goaler?
So, like many other people advocating for a secular morality, they would say that or in step with what I earlier said, like with words, they don't have an inherent meaning or value. They have usages, and we imbue value in them. I don't know, therefore, that I necessarily do have an inherent value. If by inherent value we're talking about something imposed.
Did you value to do those quotes with your fingers?
Huh? Well, I do value myself, but it's not because of a creator God, going all the way back. There are more practical, as well as more simple and simply understood.
Like what?
Why I value myself? Because I'm alive. And I value being alive.
You're saying that presuppositionalism begs the question.
Will mind ever, and that's okay, because it's a part of the same supposition that says, I'm in a room right now talking to you across the internet, and though I can't demonstrate that I'm not in fact hooked up to a brain in a vat, like solipsism, so I can't demonstrate that that's not indeed the case.
You can demonstrate that you, the inquirer, exist, though, right?
I have no reason to think that that is in fact the case. And regardless, I'm in this reality, stuck dealing with this. Your claim is that there's a creator God that you have some concept of, although it's not quite clear, because it's hard to pin down on this. Are you suggesting that we all inherently have an understanding of a creator God?
Yes.
And that it also, of course,
not inherently. We realize that as we reflect upon our own existence.
Well, you can't say yes, not inherently, because that was the question.
Well, I want to be very careful about what you're asking.
Right.
If you're saying that we are programmed with moral law within us, yes. If you want to say that we reflect upon our own creation, that there's a God.
That we have, because look, you're identifying something, and I would agree that there is something there. And I mean, we wouldn't be the first people to identify this, which is that because you're calling it a code, moral code. That's just the confirmation bias. I mean, demonstrate that it's a moral code. I mean, we have.
Do you think that all men? Do you think that you should be allowed to kill people in a society?
No, and that's entirely separate, because what you're saying is we have a moral code imbued in our hearts. That's in step with what the Bible might say, but I don't know that there's actually evidence, and you haven't demonstrated that that's the case. What actually we do observe can much more easily be explained, not because of reductionism, but because of just the fact that there's evidence for it. which is that we have, for example, and there are people that can explain this better, like scientists, the same people that study other social groups of animals. There are certain metrics that they use to measure these qualities of their behavior. There is reason to treat each other well,
What
to
is
not
that
kill each
reason?
other, for example. Well, as
Why?
you said yourself, which is why I'm kind of surprised now, because you actually said this earlier. If we didn't value life and we didn't value not killing each other,
We
we'd
wouldn't
all
exist.
likely be dead, and we wouldn't even be able to participate in this discussion and have the conversation.
Is that a bad thing?
Say again?
Is that a bad thing
Is what a bad thing?
for us to not be here?
We wouldn't be here even
So,
answer that
so you're
question.
saying that it's somehow special that we're here.
Now, I'm not saying it's somehow special. That's
Then what are you
definitely what's
saying?
led to that.
So whether we're here or
And
not
that's
here is no different, and yet you're making a big demarcation that it is.
what I'm saying is it is inherent to our existence that we both want to exist and that if we
And
want to exist well, we're sapiens. So the name of the game is, of course, not just how to live and survive, but how to live well. I mean,
the
I'm
question
not
is
even sure what the
why?
analogy.
You just keep begging the
Why? Well,
questions.
hold on, because I'm wondering. I'm wondering. Do you believe that? Like, let's say I didn't even have an answer. How does that, in and of itself, give any credence or any weight to what you're claiming? It
Because that's how
doesn't.
debate works. I make an assertion, and if you can't rebut it, you either change your mind or you attack me as an evil person. What are you going to do?
I do not believe that's how debates work. I mean, I get what you're saying, but that doesn't. That in and of itself does not mean that what you're putting forth is correct.
Okay, well
It just
then if you can't rebut it, then you either
or
concede
not
it,
down.
you can say, you can put it under advisement and say, well, think about that. But you cannot say you are wrong without giving me a reason why I am not wrong.
Well,
You got to give a justification for your view. That's how
I'm
debate
not
works.
putting forth. I'm not putting forth a positive claim, though. You are, and you're not. You're
And
not.
I put forth a positive claim, and you said it was wrong, and I'm saying, why do you say it's
I'm
wrong?
saying
And you
so.
say nothing.
This is the earlier thing that I wanted to make sure we had clear. Which, don't get me wrong, it's something that can be said a million times, and it often is not always put into practice. I didn't say it was. Although to be clear, I don't know exactly what you're referring to specifically when you say that I said it was wrong because we've covered a lot of territory. But as far as what you're putting forward, if it's wrong, that doesn't mean I'm saying it's necessarily the case that it's false. I'm saying it's yet to meet its burden of proof and that I don't perhaps know. Again, depends what we're talking about.
Okay,
But if I
I
don't
proved it
know,
to you,
that
though.
doesn't in and of itself give your assertion any more um, uh, weight. You
Sure
have
it
to
does.
actually
That's what the
demonstrate.
proof is. I make an assertion and I give you reasons for my assertion, and then you cannot rebut it. You can't say it's not warranted because I gave you the warrant and you couldn't rebut it.
Well, I think I did rebut it every time we talk about, what you mean by, because we've been going over this. I want to know what you think morality even is.
Morality, well, morality is different from ethics. Ethics is the framework that you set forth for right and wrong. Morality
Right.
is just your practice of it.
Yeah.
So,
I wanted you to
social
define
living.
morality. So how would you define morality? What is the goal here?
Well, proper morality would be that which promotes the sanctity of existence.
Okay.
And God himself is existence, so worship of him is the ultimate good.
I don't know that sanctity. I don't know what does that do for us.
Holy, specialness, set apartness.
Is
Your
it just
life is set apart, and that's why you
anything?
drink coffee.
Wait, our what? Our minds are set apart. That's why I drink
No, I
coffee.
said your life is set apart. That's why you
Oh,
drink coffee.
I drink
You
coffee
feed yourself, you care for yourself because you know that it's special.
because I'm on this planet. And as all of the research shows, when we investigate other social species, we care about being alive. If you want to impose this why question, it would be no different. Well, potentially, it would be no different than if I were to impose a question of when or where on what came before the Big Bang. It may in fact be a question that you formed, but is nonetheless nonsensical.
How
I
so?
mean, how do you know that why applies?
Demonstrate it to be nonsensical. Show
Because
me
it's
the formal
tautology, and I
fallacy in it.
can't therefore answer it without engaging in circular reasoning. I don't
I didn't
know how
engage. You're engaging in circular reasons. I'm not.
okay. Well, Say again?
You're
No,
engaging in secular reason, but I'm not.
I, I wasn't saying anybody, either of us was. I was just saying without, sort of out of avoiding that.
Okay, but if it doesn't apply to either one of us, why'd you bring it up?
Do you believe um, that your God is Yahweh? Is that the God you believe, if you don't mind me asking?
Yes. I'm
Okay.
a Christian, remember?
Right, but you'd be surprised how many different Christians there are. I mean, it's not a whole one monolithic homogeneous thing. It just isn't. I wish it were, because it would be easier to, discuss. There's always disqualifiers and stuff. And anyway, I didn't want to like, I know for sure. Um, I ask because when you look at the moral teachings in the Bible, they actually come into conflict in many
So,
places. So, I mean, we can just beeline this, go for the jugular, so to speak. There are ideas like slavery present, which, to be clear, and maybe my theology is wrong here, but I don't think it is. Um, 'Cause I don't find that there's any amount of spin that could, soften this. You have ideas like slavery, which it's not as though it's merely recorded in the books, but it is specifically condoned and sanctioned by God. This is in Exodus as well as Leviticus, easily more damning in Leviticus, but certainly not particularly moral to say the least in Exodus, because you still have the idea even within indentured servitude and bond servants and workers and that kind of thing. Even within that system, which by the way, who is like in charge of it specifically? How much oversight is there? How do we know that there aren't cases of abuse? How do we know that some slaves maybe didn't get to leave after 6 years? Like, is all that being accounted for? I doubt it. So it's not like the most,
so if they don't do it, then they're sinning, right?
morally rich. What?
So if they don't follow the prescription, then they're sinning, right?
Yeah, but like we don't merely, throw a honors or we don't throw a sign up over, a prison, door and say, hey, it's the honor system. Nobody leave. If you leave, you're gonna say. I mean, like what I'm what I my
What are
point
the
was that.
prescriptions for sinning in the Old Testament?
Hold on, you can't do that because if I don't finish, it's very very. I'm not accusing you, and I wouldn't do that of employing such a cheap tactic, but that's nonetheless what it amounts to. I need to finish the thought.
Okay, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Well, just because you brought up the fact that they're sinning as if that somehow, therefore, the Bible is accounting for it. And that's, I mean, that's not very useful, is it? I mean, we don't, the prison system, it's not on the honor system. We have people that are in.
Neither is the Old Testament.
Sorry?
Neither is the Old Testament. It's
Neither.
not in the honor systems. It's a theocracy. There are laws, civil laws with it are in place to guide and direct these sort of things.
All right. And so was it moral for people in the, or was it moral then? I mean, I'm not a moral relativist. Are you? Was it ever moral to condone and sanction owning people as though they are property, beating them within an inch of their life, or as it says in Exodus, as long as they get up in a day or two? That's what's in indentured servitude.
Are you talking about which kind of slave are you talking about? Indentured servitude?
Indentured servitude. That's in Exodus 21.
Okay. All right. So what was the purpose of indentured servitude? Why would somebody do something like that?
And I'm happy to talk more about this, but just to be clear, there is also a broader concept of slavery, which also is owning people as property, which, I mean, in and of itself is that's damning enough, but like slave trade. But anyway, yeah, going back to I'll be trying to talk about that for a while. What was your question about indentured servitude?
We're talking about indentured servitude. Why would somebody give themselves to indentured servitude?
Well, to my knowledge, it was to work off like a debt, which is totally sensible. I mean, that's not what I think really anybody would have a problem with. But yeah, to answer your question, to my knowledge, it was because they didn't have like a job, I guess. I mean, it could be any of the above. They're essentially going into work a debt off. It's not quite like the
right. So they didn't have a way to provide for themselves. If they didn't go to indentured servitude, what would happen to them?
I don't know. What I mean, because God's present, is He not? I mean, how do I know that? Because here's the thing too, and it's going to constantly nag at us.
Did they have a social welfare system in those times?
A social what?
Social welfare system.
Social welfare? Well, if they did, it would look very different than like what we have in America. Are you in America? I don't even ask. I don't want to
Yes,
assume.
I'm in Kansas City.
Okay, I didn't want to be like an obnoxious, American and just assume that everywhere is
No.
America. So, uh, yeah, Kansas. I have family. My mom, I think, is from Kansas.
What part?
Anyway, I'd have to ask her again. I mean, I
Oh,
just know
okay.
it's scary tornado land and stuff. Back east.
Okay.
We're very fortunate here. So anyway, to my knowledge, if they had anything remotely close to a welfare system, uh, it wouldn't. It they had a welfare system, it would be very different than ours. Sure, at
Well, they did
bottom,
have a welfare system. It was called indentured servitude.
okay.
And so, what
Um,
happens when you become a servant of someone else? Is that something that you would want to do?
Become a servant of somebody else. Well, I don't know. I guess if I'm looking at it from the perspective of it's either this or death, which again, we're looking back on this. I don't necessarily know, and I don't believe that you necessarily know that that was definitely the case. What we have is, like with many of the other beliefs pertaining to stuff from that time, we have, we're giving the benefit of the doubt, at least to some degree.
You were asking me to give justification from my perspective, and I'm just giving it.
Well, no, I mean, I don't need justification so much for indentured servitude. I need justification for how it's propped up. I mean, you're saying that this either. I guess we shouldn't get the cart ahead of the horse. Do you believe that the Bible is provides a moral code by which to live by? Because
One more time. I'm a Christian.
right.
Okay, Christians believe
Okay.
that the Bible is authoritative for moral code in the way they live their lives. Yes.
So so here's the thing. You're talking about not a system that people just kind of fell into or came up with on their own. I'd have no issue. In fact, if assuming that that happened or anything close to that happened, that's how I actually imagine it happened. Was that it was came about by people doing the best of what they could do, so to speak. Although I'm sure people are also jerks at times and weren't always doing the best they could do. But you're advocating that there is a supernatural deity who, for some reason, could go so far as to condone and sanction indentured servitude, even beating the servants because, as it says, they're the master's property. This is a benevolent being, is it not? I mean, I don't want to cover too much territory here. I know that there's a different theological, undertaking that um,
But we have a broken world. Would you agree with that from the Christian perspective? I'm not saying you, but
a broken world. I don't think I do. In fact, no. I would say that you're saying that there's a broken world. I don't agree. I think that for every person that does something bad, we also have examples of people doing good things.
no.
So
What
it
good
would
and
be
bad? You're saying if there's bad, then there's brokenness, right?
well, but and if there's good, there's good. So I mean, why are you emphasizing
Listen,
one not the other?
Adam, I've got to go
In
to
my view
bed.
of a whole,
I'm not going to be able to get up in the morning.
that's fine. No, hey, I forgot. I mean, you probably have a different time than me. So that said, it was nice talking to you. I appreciate you extending the invite.
Well, we can do it
Feel
again
free.
if you want. I mean, I'm happy to continue on, but I need to get to bed because I got to get
That
up
would
in the
be
morning.
great. Yeah, I only recently joined this group. I had seen a link to it when I was moderating this other group that deals with like William Lane Craig apologetics and that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So for no good reason, it led me to this one. But yeah, so I recently joined. So
So did I. I've not been here that long.
oh, okay,
So
great.
I
Well,
didn't actually. I didn't even join. One of my precept buddies joined me and just signed me up, put me on
oh,
there. So
yeah, I mean, however it happens, I have a precept buddy that I invited to that William Lane Craig because all kinds of apologetics get employed and talked about. So, and that's
uh,
what's great about the internet. But anyway, all that
what
to say,
did you wait a minute? Did you you said something about precept? Oh, do you know who Scott Clifton is?
that name sounds really familiar.
Theoretical BS was his.
Oh yeah, I mean, YouTube is where I would
I
watch.
think he used to be on this page. I'm not sure. He's blocked me now. I'm trying to get him. He won't do a hangout with me. He won't talk to me. But
It's
I was thinking maybe you knew
it's
him because he
tricky
came in
thing
about the same time
to
I did.
contact
So
YouTube celebrities. Yeah, well, that's interesting though, because I mean, that guy. Yeah, it's funny. He's one of the few that I don't watch as much and keep up with as much, but I've heard nothing but good things in terms of like
he's a sharp guy. He hasn't done it in several years.
Yeah, he's
He
one of the
got
old.
married and has a family, but anyway, he likes to troll the precept pages because he knows it's not logically coherent, so he likes to troll them. And I troll him, and he finally just blocked me because he didn't want to do a hangout. He didn't want to do a hangout that's recorded.
Like, what are they talking about? That's great.
Yeah,
Well, so yeah, I recently joined. You recently joined. So I mean, hopefully, we can keep this going at least on occasion if you'd like. I would love that, and maybe even over time, kind of as we accumulate more fans or fellow friends, we can also include them because
sure.
you can get kind of a good experience from both. But yeah, anyway, I'll let you go.
Okay, well, yeah, thank you very much, Adam. It's nice to meet you, and I'm sure we'll see you again sometime soon.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'll just frequent that page all the more. I mean, because it's hard. I mean, it's an undertaking. There's a lot of baggage to uncover when you're talking about two very different etymologies, but
sure. Yeah.
But it is nonetheless a passion of mine. Something like this. So I'll see you around. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Nice to meet you, and we'll see you.
I'll see you.
All right. Bye.